You're listening to The Play Pouch. Welcome back, everyone. Today is a very exciting episode. It is a long time coming. We are finally going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, the game. Oh, God, I've been waiting for this for so fucking long. You don't even understand, bro. You've kind of thrashed your way through it, probably at a normal pace.
Yep, about 4 hours ago.
Yeah, we're going to discuss all things Final Fantasy VII. But before we do, please like and subscribe, hit the notification button, leave us a comment about what you think about the game. And so we're going to crack right on. Now, I was so dubious, you know. I mean, like I think I've only completed this game, the original game, once, and
Right.
I've seen bits and pieces like over the years of other people playing it and stuff, and it's always just sort of been there in my heart somewhere. Good old Aerith, just she won my heart over, as I'm sure she did you and a lot of other people. So that really is the lasting memory I have of Final Fantasy VII. And so to see this new version come out or be announced, I was very dubious. I was skeptical. They had a development team working on it, which Square Enix didn't like. I think it was like a few years later, and they sort of said,
They'll do it themselves.
"No, this is garbage. Yeah, we're going to take it in-house." So I kind of got a bit more upbeat about it because it is a very much beloved game for them and for the fans as well. So what did you think of the original, first of all? I mean, I know pretty much what the answer is going to be, but...
The original probably was... It's still in my top 5, if not top 2 favourite games of all time. It's certainly probably the most impactful game that I played based upon my age. So, I was middle teenage years, I'm going to say. Not having the best of times in my personal life at the time, as most teenagers don't. It taught me that there could be stories in games. And there could be characters in games, and you could invest yourself emotionally in video games. Because up to that point, there'd been very little of those kind of games around. Most games, it was based around getting a high score or killing the last boss. It was the first one, that, like I say, emotionally dragged me in and left such a big impact on my life at the time. I mean, I ended up playing that game through at least 7 or 8 times, and it's not the original is not a short game, but I ended up playing 7 or 8 times, and then making sure I got every secret that I could. And by this time, the internet was just about slightly coming in, but there was physical guides, like the books. I remember I had one of the big books guides, so that I'd know how to get everything and every single secret and all the things to do. There was a whole big mini game with the chocobos. You had to breed chocobos and all these things and all these crazy things you could do in the original. So I just played it over and over again. So I like you.
There's a special sword that you can get in the Shinra building right at the start of the game, I'm told.
I think you can steal it, yeah. I think there's a sword I think you can steal. From an enemy and stuff like that, and then the Knights of the Round Table, the Knights of the Nine, kind of the best material in the game. You could get that, but in order to get that, you had to spend hours and hours doing this whole chocobo breeding thing, and you have to breed a special type of black chocobo, I think, or a gold chocobo, and that would be able to run over mountains, as silly as it sounds, but that's the way the world map worked. So you have to breed these really rare chocobos. It would take a lot of trial and error to do, just so you could run over this mountain in the world map, so you could get the most powerful materia and stuff like that. And I loved it. It engrossed me totally, even though the graphics and everything were, especially if you look at it nowadays, very limited. But but like you, when they said they were going to announce it, I mean, the fans had wanted it for so long, and Square Enix kind of dug their heels in for whatever reason. I guess they were just more interested in making new property. And then once I think maybe that it got to a certain level where I guess they just felt they couldn't deny the fans anymore, and they did obviously announce this game many years ago now, for being made, but I was really skeptical about it, dude, because Square Enix have gone so far away from the days of Final Fantasy VII, and their most recent game, Final Fantasy 16. Apparently, as a game, it's not the worst thing in the world or anything, but it's not what I would call a Final Fantasy. So they've really changed what Final Fantasy is. It's no longer really an RPG in a sense that I would call it anyway. So
yeah, I mean, like the fact that they had sort of gone away from what makes a good Final Fantasy game with the resulting titles. I know. I mean, like I liked number 8 a lot and stuff, but I didn't bother with 9 or 10 or 11. I know you like 10.
Yeah, 10 was good.
So yeah, I mean, moving on from that to obviously the remake. When I first looked at it, because I don't own a PS5, I watched the movie. I watched Maximilian Dude play it, whom he's a really good streamer. And within the first half an hour, I knew this was going to be a good one because of the amount of effort, the amount of detail that they put in to the game, and every little nuance, everything. And this guy Maximilian was just sort of like, he was in tears, man. He couldn't handle it because they got it so right. And not only that, the visuals were just absolutely stunning. Sure, at the time it was in 30 frames a second, but it was so good. It just sunk you into that world instantly.
Well, a lot of it was I think a lot of people's fears going into it, mine included, were look, what you got to do generally is look at like Hollywood and the success rate of remakes, right? It's not high, let's be honest. And it's the same, and games are not exactly that much better as well. I mean, sometimes they get it right. The Resident Evils. I mean, we did a cast on remakes not long ago. They don't always get it right. A lot of times they don't get it right, or something gets lost in transition, translation, whatever you want to say. So it was a valid criticism that it's like, well, can they bring that kind of feeling of the original? And I would say, for the most part, they did. I think that the characters look, and I think the film Advent Children, if you've ever heard of that, Final Fantasy Advent Children, which is kind of almost like a little bit of a sequel, really. I think that helped them base the characters. They looked at what Advent Children looked like, and they said, okay, so we've got an idea of what they probably would look like with today's graphics, I suppose. So they've done a very good job. Like Tifa looks like Tifa, Barrett looks like Barrett, Red 13 looks like Red 13, Cloud, they're all pretty much as you would expect. And the only thing, I mean, I'll probably wait that. I do have a couple of criticisms of the game, and I do want to kind of get this off my chest, and it's an interesting one, really, because it makes you think. It makes you think the way games are made. So it's a lot about the game design. Final Fantasy 13. I don't know if you've played that or not, Pete, but that's the one when Lightning is the main character in that. It's a woman called Lightning, and that was not regarded as a very good game. And one of the main criticisms of that game was that it felt like you were walking down corridors. The way the game manipulated how the game was is that there's no world map or anything like that, and it felt like you were just walking down corridors. And I would say that I felt some of that in this game.
Yeah, it is very sort of blatantly linear.
Yeah, a little bit surprisingly so for me. I can give you an example. Like, I'm quite a slow player. I like to explore in my games. I like to look around. I like to make sure I collect every chest. And the amount of times where they would give me a cutscene, which is fine. I've got no problem with the cutscenes. And then all I wanted to do was run back to the last area to see if I missed anything. The amount of times that the game wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
And I felt really confined at times. And it was a feeling that I was not really used to, especially in RPGs. And all I kept on thinking is, well, this is like Final Fantasy 13. And Final Fantasy 13 was ripped apart for doing this, and this is getting a pass. People are not saying the same thing. So I thought to myself, why is that? And I suppose it comes down to the story, because Final Fantasy 13 Final Fantasy 13 story was gobbledygook, basically. I mean, I know this isn't a Final Fantasy 13 podcast, but I'm just kind of trying to explain some similarities about that. But that comes down to, I think, also the fact that they have taken the Final Fantasy 7 story, and I mean, because of the ending, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen next, which is a good thing. But based upon the original game, they've split it in between discs. So the original game came on 3 discs, and the end of the first disc is when you leave Midgar. And that is exactly obviously when this game ends. So it's because I know there's going to be 3 games, it was easy to assume that it's going to be a disc each. But of course, the ending of the first game kind of suggests that maybe that going forward, maybe those things should not be taken for granted anymore.
Well, yeah, we're going to get on to all of the theories and stuff. But I just want to sort of focus on the sort of the mechanics, the things that made that game. One thing that I suppose that we haven't considered is that maybe there was a reason that the game didn't allow you to go back. Maybe it's got something to do with RAM limitations for the PS4 or 5, whatever it was on originally.
I think it's game design rather than on the technical side, because it was just like, I turned around because I wanted to explore a certain area, and then the camera would shift and I'd get a message saying, or one of the other characters I was with would say, no, this way, Cloud, or this way, Cloud, this way, Cloud. And you physically couldn't go back. And they wanted to move the story on, and I understand that. Like I said, I think I was just taken a little bit back by the A to B to C nature. And from a narrative point of view, that's fine, because they want to move the story on, and that's fine. But for me, because how I normally play these kind of games, being told that I can't go back, it's kind of like, well, I've then got to remember to try and come back later on if I can. And most of the time that I could go back later on, but it just kept on kind of forcing me down certain paths. And I just remember thinking, can you just stop for a second so I can go back and do that and then continue on? And I didn't like that feeling, but it was a really heavy narrative driven game that I'm used to. But I suppose because it's so it's hard to criticize them so much, because the first disc of Final Fantasy VII, the original, was just in Midgar, but that was linear as well. And the Final Fantasy VII game doesn't really open up until the second disc, when you get onto the world map, because there's no world map in the first disc. And because this is obviously following the first disc mostly, there isn't any linear place, because you're stuck in the city, so to speak, and the only traveling you do is between the slums. Really, you barely go to the top of the Midgar. Most of the time you're wandering around the slum areas, which is what you did in the original. But because this is the whole game, it felt a bit confined, but maybe that was the idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, they consciously made it linear. But because of the size of Midgar, it makes you want to explore it, doesn't it? I mean, like, you want to be able to be free to go to different sectors, to go above and below and explore everywhere and stuff like that. But they have a story to tell, and I guess all of their runtime development was on that, and they just sort of said no free roaming, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the only time that you're really left alone, if that's the right phrase to use, is there's a couple of points in the game where you're more or less told, either by Tifa and then later on by Aerith, where there's some side quests to do, lack of a better term. They phrase it like, "Oh, there's some people who probably need your help in the slums. Why don't you go talk to them?" And then that's when you give them a little bit of freedom to pick up a couple of side quests and run around a bit and have a little bit of freedom. There isn't much game area, and again, I'm probably saying these criticisms to kind of get them out of the way, because there's so much that will be praised, especially when it comes to story and character. But these are limitations that I did notice. And the fact that I don't think it was a very big game. There's quite a lot of backtracking as well through the same areas. There's not that many areas, really, other than the last area, which surprised me, because this big Shimmer building at the end was much bigger and much longer than I had any idea. That covers like 3 chapters, more or less, just a Shimmer building at the end.
So if we talk about the various sort of other mechanics, the combat, for instance. Were you happy with the combat?
At
Because
the
I was,
start,
I was fine with it.
I thought it was a little bit. It depends. I mean, you only get to play as 4 characters, even though Red 13 technically. I'm assuming next game. I mean, that was a little bit disappointing. The fact that you couldn't play as Red 13. The fact that that in the original game again, which is what I've got to compare it to. In the original game, he becomes a party member and you can play as him. In this game, you can't play as him. He joins your party as like an NPC, so you can't control him, which was a little bit disappointing. I assume because he's not in the game enough. They thought that they would okay, there's no point. We're not going to bother making him a combat character for you to play as because you're only going to be playing for him for 2 chapters. So they relegated him to being an NPC, which was a little disappointing. But
I get that. I get that decision, though. I mean, like you introduce him right at the end of a single game, which is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's the decision they made. I did think I'd be able to play as him, but that wasn't the case. But the combat overall, it took me a while to get into. I won't lie. At the start, there's 2 ways of playing it. You can play like normal classic and then just normal. Normal classic is where the characters will kind of attack and defend by themselves, and you just issue commands, which I suppose is the closest thing to turn-based you're going to get. And originally I played with that, but I found myself not liking how the AI was attacking and blocking. They blocked too much for my liking and stuff like that. I was like, no. So eventually I took over the full command where you could physically move out of line of fire from some enemies' attacks and stuff like that, which the AI wouldn't do that well. So in the end, I got the hang of it, but it took me a while. It did. It did take me. It did take me a while. And there was a part of me that was thinking, I do wish this was just turn-based. I do wish this was just turn-based as I remember it and as I'm used to. But turn-based generally is frowned upon nowadays. It is. It's just the way that it is. So it's one of those things.
Baldur's Gate 3 is keeping that formula alive.
Yeah, and so maybe there'll be a little bit of a resurgence from it. I think Baldur's Gate, whenever that comes on Xbox, I'll be picking it up. But it was a blend of arcade. You could just kind of some of the Cloud, for example, because he had such wide strikes with his Buster Sword. It was tempting when you play as Cloud just to run in there and just hit the attack button, and he would just end up hitting most of the enemies. And you could power through to a certain degree doing that. But against the bosses, you couldn't do that. Against the smaller enemies, you could sometimes just kind of power your way through, just smashing the attack button generally. But when it came to the bosses and everything, you need to be a lot more discreet. I do like the fact they kept the same materia system. The materia system is complete 1-to-1 from the original game, which is where you put all your skills and stuff like that. So to see them just that was a complete just replication of the original game. Some things didn't need to be fixed like that, so that was fine.
They removed some materia though, didn't they? Didn't they remove like some kind of info materia or like enemy info materia they removed?
No, they've changed the name a bit. It's called you get a materia called assess.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the same thing. And to be honest, you really need that, especially against the mini bosses and the main bosses. You need that because some of them have very unique mechanics. Like there's only one element that will work on them, and then they'll resist other elements. One of the things I suppose I didn't like was there was no kind of auto save regarding the materia slots, so it meant that whenever you change character, which in this game is actually quite often, and I'll get to something about the last level or so, which was infuriating, which is about this, and that is that you couldn't like save slots. So it's like if you put this materia in the slots for a certain character, you couldn't save that as a loadout. So every time that you switch character, right? Like for example, let's say you're always going to want to have one of your characters is always going to want to have a healing spell, right? One of your characters. And generally how I play it is generally I'd have, because normally you've got at least 2 characters in your party. Sometimes you'll have 3. Every now and again you'll have just Cloud, but most of the time you've got at least 2. So one of them would be a magic-based character who would be the healer and then using magic. and the other one would be more of a tank, more of a physical attack. So that's how I like to play the game. But every time that they switch characters, I'd have to move the materia across bit by bit by bit, and it was quite a long process. And at the end level or two, where it splits your party up into two, I loved the idea behind it, because at that point in the game, you've got all four characters, right? So you've got Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, and Cloud. And a limitation of the game, you can only have 3 people in your party, which was the same as for the original, by the way. But you can only have 3 people. But the game gave you 4 characters at that point in the game. Technically you had 5 characters with Red, but Red was an NPC. But what the game did is it split it between 2 parties. So, and your parties have to pull different levers so the other party can progress, and that's fine. But the amount of time that I had to spend in the last level moving materia across every single time. Honestly, dude, I was getting really frustrated.
This YouTuber had the same criticism. He said it would have been lovely if it would have been lovely if we had materia loadouts and stuff.
And especially in that last level, dude. And because the last level keeps on splitting you between the 2 parties. And also something it would do as well is that every now and again you'd get a cutscene next to a cutscene. So let's say that I'm playing as Barrett and Cloud for argument's sake, and I've got a certain materia set up just for those 2, right? Then it cuts to another cutscene, and I have to play as Tifa and Aerith. But the game does not give me a chance to move my materia across. So I'm literally fighting that battle with no materia. And there was one battle in particular. It was a robot near the end of the game. I literally did it earlier today. Just as they're leaving the Shimmer building, you've got Cloud and Tifa up top. They've just done their kind of boss battle. And then you go down to Barrett and Aerith. They've got to do a boss battle. Neither one of those people had any materia equipped because I'd moved them all to Cloud and Tifa. And the game did not give me a chance to access the main menu and change the materia around. So when I did that boss battle, I had to do it with no materia.
Ah, shit.
Which was incredibly difficult, as you can imagine. So my only option would be to go back and have to play both boss battles again, which the Cloud boss battle against Rufus Shimmer was not that easy. I didn't really want to do that again, so I persevered. I got through it eventually, but it's not meant to be done that way. The game somehow, I was meant to know somehow that I needed to have materia on all 4 of them for that, and I had no way of knowing that. So again, we're going through little criticisms. It's just like they could have done something there, because you're encouraged to move materia between party members because you're only limited so many materia and you've got to grow it, right? So the smartest thing to do is to get your materia and move it across to the active companions, which is all fine for most of the game, because most of the game you've only got 2 or 3 people max, so it's not a problem until you get to this part of the game where the game alternates between these 2 different parties. And I just wish that, I mean, obviously if I were to play it back now, I'd know in advance and plan, but there's no way of knowing that that's going to happen. And it's because this is fresh in my mind because I only did it earlier today. It was just like, oh wow, I'm spending just as much time in the menu screen moving materia across, back and forth, especially between the mages, because you've got to set them up to be have the healing spells, and then they need the element spells, and then they need the magic ups. Do you know what I mean? And there's certain setups you have to keep moving across again and again and again. It's just like this. They screwed up the design in that. So I am saying a lot. I'm saying a lot of bad things, Pete. But I really do love the game. But I'm saying this stuff as a fair criticism of some of the design issues. That hopefully the next game they have some kind of loadout or something like that to, if they're going to do that, which I assume they will, because if you're going to be stuck with only 3 members, you're going to be starting off the next game with 5 characters, I imagine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's most likely a reason why they didn't want you to progress so much in terms of leveling up the materials and stuff, is that by the time the second one comes out, they're sort of bringing it back a little bit, so you start off not as high a level as you were, and things like that. So it's not going to be a case of you starting the second game where you left off in terms of levels and where your materia is at. So I'm told.
Yeah, they'll
So
probably. I expect they will. They'll probably. I think they'll reset everything. I imagine, which is okay. I'm not that
I don't think
bothered
they're
by
going to
that.
reset, but they'll sort of, they'll give you a starting level, which is, based on how much you completed in the previous game or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like the whole materia sort of loadout issue was a big one, and maybe there was a reason why they didn't implement it. Maybe they just wanted to build the framework for the second one, because the second one is an open world and you can go where you want. And I'm hoping that there's no restrictions there. I mean, yeah, I mean, like there was restrictions in the original one, but of course, I'm assuming they want to emulate that for this, for Rebirth. So the music, I just want to sort of bring up, I thought was really good.
It's fantastic. The score was fantastic. They took the original themes and changed them enough to where they are their own songs, but they are wonderfully done. And after just hearing it a couple of hours ago, the end theme when the credits roll, where they've
Yeah,
actually recorded, a vocalist has recorded a song with the same tune from one of the original songs, and it's got lyrics and everything like that. So they've turned it into a proper song. And I was just listening to it, just thinking, this is great. I'd be interested probably in buying the soundtrack if they did a remake cover for all the original songs, but with vocalists, because they did a really good job with the end theme, and there's a couple of the original themes are still kind of there. Some of them you can buy on discs in the game. You can play in the jukeboxes. So they've got a lot of the original songs, but they've also got the updated ones, which are been more modernized and stuff like that. No, the soundtrack, top quality. The voice acting, top quality. All the voice actors, even my least favorite character, Barrett. Even that, the guy did a very good job in what he would sound like.
yeah.
So the voice acting, top of the range, and the score, top of the range.
Yeah, I loved all the battle music. I
Oh,
loved all
top.
the
Yeah,
exposition
yeah,
music.
yeah.
The music that plays when you're escorting Aerith through sector fucking 8 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
And it complemented everything so well. And yeah, as you said, the voice acting was just like tip top. Like
yeah.
fucking
The
god.
sound quality, they did a fantastic. I mean, the sound quality and the graphics. I mean, I can't really complain about it. Yeah, I can. I've got a couple of issues with some of the game design because they've made it. They've taken one disc and made it its own game, and we'll come on to that in a bit probably. But the sound, music, top range. I mean, this is top stuff from
Yeah.
Square Enix.
It's total god tier, but yeah, it's probably a good point to sort of talk about the storyline and how they extended it in the first disc and how they expanded on characters such as Jesse and Biggs, and the chubby dude,
Wedge,
and
yeah.
Wedge, yeah, and sort of everything else as well.
Well,
What did
the
you
first
think about
thing,
all of that?
yeah, well, the first thing I want to say about it is that it's a little bit of a unique thing because what they've technically done, which obviously people didn't think they would be going into it, including myself, is that technically they've taken a brave step by making it a remake and it being faithful to the original game, at least the first disc. But at the same time, this is the first game that I can really think of which is both a remake and a sequel.
Yeah,
If you really think about the direction that they're kind of suggesting, and it is suggesting, we'll find out more in the second game because they are going to have to explain. I don't think they explained everything, and they're probably going to have to. Hopefully, in the second game, they will answer a couple of questions. But technically, it is a sequel. It's a loose sequel, but it is a sequel. Aerith's actions and Sephiroth's actions. I especially noticed with Aerith quite early on that she knew that this was not the first time she's done this, and so did Sephiroth. They both knew. The other characters, they didn't, but Sephiroth and Aerith both knew that they'd done this before, so to speak, right?
yeah,
So, in that way, it's a sequel. For those two characters, it's a sequel. For Cloud, the main character, it's it's still a remake, and this is why it gets very brave, because some characters are doing what they did originally, and then there's a couple of characters who are like, no, we've already kind of done this. I don't want things to go down the same way, which is Aerith and Sephiroth.
Because they're ancients, aren't they?
Yeah,
Sephiroth is an ancient, isn't he?
yeah. It's not really explained per se in how they got this knowledge, that this is, because we're not really told really if this is, there's theories out there. We're not really told if this is a different timeline, if it is a reset, or if it's a different timeline. If Aerith is able to jump between timelines, and so obviously Sephiroth, if they're able to jump between timelines, and if they are, how are they able to do that? Like you said, they are ancient, so maybe there's something that lets them do it there. So there's still quite a lot of unanswered questions, but I guess the point I was making is that it is the first time I can remember they're being pretty ballsy, because it is a remake, because the story goes down more or less exactly the same way up to the point. If you just follow the disc one, with the exception of the whole Whisper stuff, the storyline goes down the same way. The plate falls, and lots of people die in a plate, and Aerith knows the plate's going to fall. During that scene where she goes to pick up Marlene, the kid, she knows the plate's going to fall before it already has. So she already knows that this is going to happen. She knows the plate's going to fall. And it's a sequel. Like I say, it's weird because it's a sequel, but it's a remake. But it's a sequel. But it's a loose sequel. It's a loose sequel because only some of the characters know that it's a sequel. But most of the characters don't. Most of the characters treat it the way they did in the original game, except, like I say, these kind of two characters. And the cat, Red 13, he actually ends up changing halfway through the story because Aerith touches him, and then you get the kind of the shift thing, like what happened with Marlene as well. And then Red 13 says to her, "Oh, Red 13, he's the one who tells them what they're called." And Cloud goes like, "Well, what are these things?" And Red 13 goes, "They're whispers." And then he says, "I know that because after she touched me, she showed me."
Yeah, I think that was the first clue, really.
You don't know what she showed him exactly, but he had knowledge that he didn't have before. So that kind of means that she's done this before. Sephiroth obviously has done this before, but now Red 13 got the memories, like I guess that Marlene kid when Aerith did the same thing to her. Did she kind of like show her a different time? You know what I mean? It's not. There's still information to be had, and hopefully the second game will fill out some of those gaps. But
what made Marlene stop crying? This is what we have to. This is one question that I have, because Marlene was really upset, and then when Aerith hugs her and then moves away, she's staring at Aerith in complete fucking wonderment, and Aerith tells her to shush.
Be quiet, yeah.
Right? Yeah, don't say anything, in other words. It's like, what did she tell Marlene? And what did Marlene see? And, we can speculate over that. I dare say we'll find out in the second one. But these plot ghosts, which were there to keep everything happening as it did before, and the fact that they were pretty much eradicated at the end is a very telling sort of plot point, essentially. And the fact that Jesse died and Biggs died or fell unconscious because he's alive.
Yeah, based upon the end cutscenes, it looks like Biggs actually survived. You see him obviously waking up in the orphanage with a bandage on his head, so it looks like he survived, which obviously did not happen in the original. And I think the big I suppose twist is that it looks like, and this is where it's not actually explained, is that there's a character called Zack who is a star of the Final Fantasy Crisis Core, and his role in the original game, I don't know if you remember, Pete, is that he ends up saving Cloud and brings Cloud to Midgar, but then gets killed in the process. He's also Aerith's first boyfriend as well.
Yeah.
And he dies. But in this, right at the end, which more or less nearly the end cutscene, is that in this one, he doesn't die. But the thing that makes no sense is that he already did die. he already did die because it's already happened. Cloud's already in Midgar at the start of the game. So they haven't gone back in time and made him alive in this world. So he's carrying Cloud into Midgar. So that suggests to me that that's a different timeline.
Yes,
which is why I'm being a bit
is.
confused. It suggests it's a different timeline.
It is a different timeline. There can be no other explanation. I mean, like, why would they show us that right at the end?
So I'm starting to think if Aerith and Sephiroth are from the other timeline.
Yeah, I would probably say that as well. They're definitely making a thing out of multiple timelines, and they're not sort of saying such. But if you put 2 and 2 together, you can work it out.
No, I mean we've joked about the multiverse though, and it looks like maybe that's what they're doing. Now I don't mind the idea of the multiverse. It's just because it has been used a lot. Unfortunately, it's been used a lot lately. Obviously, mainly in Marvel, who have done quite a bad job, in my opinion, with it.
Yeah,
with the whole multiverse stuff. But I mean, I remember watching a show called Fringe, and this was maybe 15 years ago, and that was all about the multiverse. But that was only about one multiverse. So I think they might be doing that rather than them saying there's all these multiverses. It could just be one different place.
I just think another one was created when something happened, and they're demonstrating that with the fact that Zack is still alive. But
in the other one,
in subsequent information, we've learned that all the other members of Avalanche are dead in Zack's timeline. So Barrett, Tifa, etc.
When did that happen?
It was in a new trailer. It was in the extended version of the trailer we saw at Game Awards. So that's further evidence that Zack is in his own timeline.
I didn't realize that. Okay, that does more or less confirm it, then, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we should really move on to the big point of this discussion. In that, is Aerith going to die? Now, let me preface this by reminding you that both Aerith and Sephiroth know what happened before. So Sephiroth knows that if he kills Aerith, that's his downfall. And if that's the case, he's probably not going to kill her. And you have to remember that there are now 2 holy materias, not 1. There's 2 now, whereas there's only 1 black materia. So there's that to consider as well. With what Sephiroth said to Cloud, 7 seconds, Cloud, right? Does that mean that you're going to have 7 seconds to make a decision between whether Aerith dies or someone else? There's a theory out there that says that it's either going to be Tifa or Aerith, because at the end of the day, the whole plot line revolves around romance and this triangle between Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith. And Aerith kind of starts falling for Cloud, especially sort of, in the first half of the second disc. And they start sort of getting a bit familiar. So knowing what we know with the remake of the first part, and can I just say as well, why is the second one called Rebirth? I don't think anyone's discussed this. I might be wrong. Probably am. But why is it fucking called Rebirth? Who gets reborn?
I think it's going to be leading towards Genova and the whole thing with Sephiroth. That's my gut reaction. See, from Sephiroth's point of view, like you've just discussed, if this is a different version of him, or let's be honest, it could be 2 of them, because this version of the Sephiroth in this timeline is still very much alive. And he's still doing the same things that he did in the original game. He still went to the Shinra headquarters, just like the original game, and he still ended up killing the president, just like he did in the original game. So yeah. Sephiroth is still following the storyline of the original timeline. So if it's really true that there is the 2 timelines, then if there's going to be kind of 2 Aeriths, as well as 2 of everybody else, then there's going to be 2 Sephiroths. Yeah. So it could be very interesting knowing that maybe they're working together, as silly as it sounds. They're working together and they know that they lose. if this is a reset kind of thing, then they know that their plan, as you said, didn't work. So it's probably not in their best interest to kill Aerith, because they know that her going back to the planet, it ends up being a bad thing for them. There is one thing I want to say, and it was always a little bit of a question. The ending of the original game, I don't know if you can remember, Pete, or if anyone else can, but you can easily find this on YouTube. Yeah. The ending of the original game is a little bit ambiguous, because what happens is that the meteor that Sephiroth calls is about to hit the Earth, and then Aerith's holy kind of stops it, and then it does a massive time jump to like 300 years later. And in this 300 years later cutscene, the last cutscene of the game, obviously everyone else is dead. All the human characters are going to be dead by this time, right? So the only character that's running around is Red 13, because he must, they must live a lot longer. And the last cutscene is him running with, I assume, his family, so to speak, and he stops to pause on like a mountaintop, and he just sees a destructed city. So my point is that they never actually show what happens to you humans. All that the last scene of the original game is, all you know for sure is that the planet was not destroyed by the meteor, and that Red 13 and his family or whatever are still alive. You get no information of if there's any humans, and it was always a little bit ambiguous. And I think they're going to play into that ambiguous. I think they might turn around, do a 360 and saying, you know what? Yeah, the planet was saved, but maybe the humans weren't. Red 13 might have survived, but the humans weren't.
Well, the game is making a point, like that the humans are the actual disease that are destroying the Earth.
Yeah, because they're raping the planet. That's right.
Yeah, so that could be what it is. Another reason could be because they wanted to produce, sequels and spin-offs and stuff that filled in that story. So we don't really know for sure what the reason for that huge gap and lack of information is. But you might be right. I don't know.
Well, in Advent Children, I suppose the counter to that is that Advent Children does exist, and I believe it's canon. I believe, but don't quote me on that. I'd actually have to go and have a look.
Everything is canon, isn't it? Everything that they produce is canon.
Then there is a bit of a follow-up then. I'd have to go and rewatch Advent Children, because I haven't watched it in a long time, to see exactly what the end the follow-up was. But if that was a follow-up, then the humans did survive. But because it's set 300 years later, it suggests, though, just in that cutscene, even if Advent Children is canon, Advent Children is set only a couple of years after Final Fantasy 7, whereas this cutscene, it says like 300 years later, so this is significantly in the future. So maybe it's a way. Maybe the point I'm trying to make is that maybe the reason why Aerith is back, so to speak, to try and make sure stuff doesn't end the same way. Maybe it's not actually her doing it for, I don't want to die. Maybe it's like, actually, the ending actually wasn't that good after all. Humans didn't survive. Red 13's creatures did, but humans didn't survive. They did end up destroying the planet because there has to be questions asked in that cutscene. Why isn't there nobody around? Why is there just rubble? And it was a question that everyone asked, and it was never really answered. Why is that the last cutscene? That's very ambiguous. Why is that the last cutscene? Why doesn't it show humanity surviving, and it doesn't? We know that the planet survives and that those creatures survive, but that's it.
Well, then, if that's the case, what's the solution? What?
Well, that's why I think that maybe Aerith has kind of come back. It's less about her saving herself. I mean, I'm sure she wants to save herself, but maybe that's not her motivation. Maybe that her motivation is that actually the planet was saved, but the people weren't. And maybe she wants a better ending. Maybe she thinks that there's a better ending. I don't know. This is all just assumptions. I don't know if it's just about, why is she so determined? Assuming she is from the other timeline, why is she so determined to? Is it just because she doesn't want to die young? I mean that's fine. That's good enough motivation for most people. But
is it more than Aerith's though? Isn't there?
Well, there must be. If it's going to be a timeline, then it must be, unless somehow that they say that the ancients have the ability to go between, which they might do. They might say that the ancients have this ability to go between. So maybe there isn't two Sephiroths. Maybe there is only one Aerith and one Sephiroth. Maybe there is only one of them and not two of them. But
Well, look, this trailer, this new trailer.
I'm gonna have to watch the trailer now. Now that I've finished the game, I can now go ahead and watch the trailer and see what's in it.
Yeah, well, there's one moment where someone, her boyfriend,
Zach
is sitting next to an Aerith that's in bed with her eyes closed. So there has to be two Aeriths, right?
It's so hard. It's so hard to know. Like that, if there's two Aeriths, then how is she? So what are you saying that so she's communicating with that version of Aerith, where Zach is alive and everything is communicating with
the other Aerith.
See, there's so much we don't know. It's what, even if there is two timelines, it still doesn't fully answer the question: is how does Aerith and Sephiroth know that this has happened before? There's something has happened that they know. They both know that this has happened before. That even with the timeline, the timeline's not set in the future though. The other timeline is
it's running parallel.
Yeah. So how do they know what happens any more than these versions? There's something else going on where, and it's probably because they are ancients, right? Where is Sephiroth and Aerith still know stuff from the future, and that still hasn't really been explained. How either of them know this stuff.
Well, there's another thing that I remember when we were watching the Game Awards and the that lady that was singing the song as Aerith finished. We got another trailer, didn't we, for some other Final Fantasy thing, which was kind of similar. And the voiceover says right at the beginning, it's not just the future that could be changed, it's the past, or something like that, right? So if you think of it like the wizards from Lord of the Rings, right? Because the wizards know a heck of a lot more that they are letting on to the humans and the elves and stuff. So if that's the case, and the ancients are similar beings in that they can see all ends, in that they can see the future and the past and the consequences of current actions and stuff like that, then they have a chance to change things. So it's either something to do with that, or it's something to do with actual different timelines, or this is something that Aerith has gone through before, and like a version, like when Doctor Strange goes through multiple, like thousands of different scenarios to see if they can then win against the Infinity War, and there's only one outcome where they do win. Maybe it's something like that as well. So as you said, we don't really know. And it is a speculation, but either there's two Aeriths, which I think is the case, in which case our Aerith is probably going to die, but then in the third disc she comes back, like Gandalf the White.
It's a difficult one, but that makes it interesting, which is going to sell the game, and that's technically what they're doing. To see how they handle it. I am with you now, and I know this is why you didn't tell me before. But I actually think it's quite unlikely Aerith will die now. I'm not saying there's not whether or not they give you a choice. I think they should give you a choice.
I think they are going to give you a choice. It's either going to be like Aerith or someone else that you love, like Tifa.
Tifa seems the obvious one. The only thing I'd say is that if Tifa were to die, with all due respect, it wouldn't affect the game that much regarding the story of the game, regarding her going back to the planet like it did with Aerith. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it was never about a catastrophic decision, was it? No. It was always about love. Who do you love? Do you love Aerith more, or do you love Tifa more? Because I remember having that feeling in the original game so strongly. And I was just thinking,
they definitely did. A big part of the game is about that.
So maybe that's what Sephiroth is saying. You have 7 seconds to decide whether Tifa dies or Aerith dies. Probably, I don't know. But I don't think Aerith is going to die, to be honest.
If Square are willing to put the work in, and I do have to say work, because I'm assuming that would be one of the last things you do in the game, especially if they follow the disc route. So that would be one of the last things you decide in the second game. So technically, they could keep the second game as is, more or less up to the last few cutscenes. Like it's going to be a bit of a negative ending. That's just the way that it is sometimes. And then the third game will be where they have to technically create two versions of the game. One in which obviously Tifa's dead, and one in which Aerith is dead. Now they can do. Mass Effects did it, but are they willing to? Because it means a lot more developmental time, because that they have to change a lot. A lot of it will be the same things, where they just have slightly different dialogue things, which is fair enough. But there's going to be some parts which will be significantly different based upon if Aerith or if Tifa dies. It just means that they had to put a lot more work in, and I'd like to think they would be willing to do it, but it does make me wonder a little bit.
Well, see, one of the principal things about this remake was, and Square Enix did catch up on this pretty fucking quickly, is that a lot of the player base didn't want Aerith to die.
No.
Right? They did. It's just like, why? What? Just so that the healing materia can work better or something like that. But if what we say is true, there's two white materias now, so there's no need for Aerith to die, right? So all she's got to do is meld them together or something. But that's only just a theory. See, it's either going to be that she dies at the end of the second disc but comes back, or we get a decision.
But the interesting thing to be that if there is two Aerith, then looking at it from the romance angle, is the Aerith in the other timeline is still going to be in love with Zack, because he didn't die. So you wonder if, because see, Zack's quite a liked character. I myself haven't played the Final Fantasy Crisis Core, but I know that he's quite liked. But I only really know him from a couple of cutscenes, to be honest. So I'm always going to be Team Cloud, so to speak, right? If you want to put it that way. Yeah. But maybe what they do is maybe it's kind of like Zack's Aerith dies doing the sacrifice kind of thing, and that the Aerith from our timeline doesn't have to sacrifice herself. So there'll still be a bit of sadness, but maybe if you're Team Cloud, which, let's be honest, the game makes you Team Cloud so far, so you're going to be okay with it, I suppose, to a certain degree. But also, because Zack is a liked character, I do wonder if the next game you'll play as him as well. Wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me if you play as him next game.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Apparently, you play as Sephiroth at the start of the second disc for a bit.
Really?
So, yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, the disc starts sort of like a few years before current events, when Sephiroth and
they're going to do the flashback.
Friends. Yeah, so that's where you get to play Sephiroth. But I mean, who knows? We could argue this until well, we're not really arguing about it. We can discuss this until the cows come home, but we just don't know. But I don't think that Square Enix is going to let Aerith die, the Aerith that we know.
I think that they'll let her die, but you will be able to save her, because it was always something which so many players, myself included, back when the game first came out, tried to do. Oh, how can I save her? Surely if I do something differently in an earlier part of the game, right, I can save her. Or surely there's something I can do after she dies to bring her back, right? And there wasn't. And you can imagine that them playing with that, thinking, yeah, well, okay, well, this time maybe if you do certain things, you can save her. What those things are, I don't know.
But this is what they're playing on. I mean, look at their marketing strategy.
Of course,
they're not saying either way, that they're playing on it. They're sort of teasing you about it. One article that said, because the question was directly asked to one of the lead programmers or whoever he was, they said, is Aerith going to die? And his response was, obviously we can't say, but there's a surprise in store. So that adds yet another nail in the coffin of Aerith. I don't think is going to die. Or it's going to be a different Aerith, or it's going to be Tifa, or something like that. there's definitely a different way to save the Earth. She doesn't have to buy it. And Sephiroth knows that if he kills her, it's all over. He's done.
I think Sephiroth won't kill her. I think that when I say he won't kill her, I'm not even sure that Cloud's going to be able to save her. I think in the end it might be that the same thing kind of transpires, but Sephiroth does not kill her because he knows that he did all this last time. It didn't work.
It didn't work. He died.
He lost. So why would he do? He wouldn't do it again. So he's playing around. He's fucking around with Cloud, obviously, but maybe his target is someone completely else.
And
because he still wants to hurt Cloud. So how would you hurt Cloud without doing the same thing, knowing you'd lose? So then you'd go after somebody else, wouldn't you? And who else does he care? Who else does he care about most? He cares about Tifa most of after Aerith. So.
I mean, like, he's teasing Cloud, isn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't
know whether Aerith touched him and gave him loads of knowledge or not. So he doesn't know where Cloud is at. So he's teasing him, he's testing him to get his reaction, and Cloud is reacting in an innocent way as if he doesn't know. So Sephiroth was taking that all the way through the first game, kept on appearing, kept on giving him these horrifying flashbacks. And he appears at the end, and in his one-winged form, and he gets his ass kicked. So where does that leave him? He's probably sort of sitting in a cave somewhere crying and going, "Nobody loved me." Who knows? Who knows, man? But
like I said, there could be two versions of him, mate. It could be that this is the version who failed, and maybe the other one in the other timeline, maybe the other one's different. Maybe he's working. It sounds silly, but maybe this version of Sephiroth is working for the other version of Sephiroth. So this guy's more of a henchman, and that the other one's the big boss. I don't know.
Jeez, yeah.
So no, there's so much left to think about. I do think they've got to answer a couple of questions. It will be interesting to see what direction they generally go. Because from the few trailers I have seen, and I have tried to avoid it for the obvious reasons, I know they go to the Gold Saucer, which is the big circus theme park place that you go in the second disc. So they are still carrying on with the same storyline. That's the thing. Even though they've kind of said, "Oh, well, the future is yours to do what you know." That's fair enough, but the Gold Saucer, I know for sure, is still going to be in the second game, so they are still going to go there. So I think they're still going to be following the storyline to a certain degree. And I've seen a clip also of the character's name is Sid, and he's the guy who does the rocket ship stuff. I don't know if you remember that.
He takes him around, doesn't he?
Yeah, he ends up he's pretty much he becomes a playable character, and he's in the game. So they are still going to be doing a lot of the same stuff. If people think it's going to be a completely different game, I don't think that's what they're doing. It's going to be more of like the first one was, where it's going to follow the general storyline, but just with different takes on it. But I think you're going to be going to a lot of the same places, just like you did with the original. So it's a little bit. I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Plus, in the trailer, we saw a clip of Marlene saying to someone, I keep forgetting who it is. But she says he's going to find her and he's going to kill her, right? So who's she talking about? Aerith, probably? Or, someone else. And they deliberately don't say. So
I think what they're going to do, mate, this is just me calling it. I think what they're going to do is they're going to play it up that it's going to be Aerith. And Sephiroth's going to play it up. It's going to be Aerith. And it's going to end up that she was never the target. It's going to be Tifa. Because him killing Tifa gets the same reaction out of Cloud, which he wanted. Yeah. But it does not release the materia, and the Ancient does not go back to the planet. It works out better for him if he knows that if Aerith goes back to the planet, it's going to stop Meteor. This way, he doesn't kill Aerith, but he gets the same reaction out of Cloud by going after Tifa. That's what I think. That's just the basic. That's what I think, and they'll tease it right to the end, and they'll be like you said, Marlene. He'll go in after her, and all the signs will point to Aerith because that's what happened in the original, right? And then they'll swerve it right at the end, and it'll be like, no, she was never the target, and it ends up killing Tifa.
Yeah, game end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. So anyway, theories and discussions all done with, for now at least. Let's give Final Fantasy VII Remake a rating. For me,
go on then, Pete. Yeah.
For me personally, for what it is, and I personally don't have any issues with it. I know you do. There's this sort of, little naggy sort of issues. But for me, I didn't feel any of that. I was cool with the fact that I couldn't go back, because it's like, well, you missed assessing that monster, so that's your fault. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give it a straight out 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because, the only way it would have gotten a 10 out of 10 is if they said, right, here's Midgar, go and explore. That's just my opinion, though. 9 out of 10.
For me, a couple of nitpicks aside, and it is a much linear game than I can remember, but they enhance every character, including the silly avalanche people, because that's what they were in the original game, Pete. They were silly avalanche guys. Had a couple of lines and you were like, yeah, all right. They made me care, especially when Jessie died, because of the end cutscene didn't suggest that she survived. The only person it showed alive was Biggs. So you have to assume maybe that she did die, at least in this timeline. So that stuff got me, because Biggs, and I thought Wedge, because Wedge was playing the kind of fat doofus, to be honest, I wasn't that invested. I was invested in him the least because I thought he was kind of a little bit of bad comedy. But the other two I thought were much more serious characters. So when I thought that they were dead, it did affect me. In the original game, I didn't care. That's the truth.
And Jessie did love Cloud.
Well, no,
I don't care what anyone says.
She certainly fancied him, and she certainly, for the first part of the game, she is the first one. Like Tifa, I think Tifa's quite a stoic character. I quite like Tifa. I think I was a bit harsh on her before, but after playing through the first game, I do quite like her. But she doesn't show that much. She shows concern for Cloud, but I don't think they've got that much chemistry in that way. I actually thought Cloud had more chemistry with Jessie than he does Tifa.
Yeah, true.
In that way. Obviously, he's got the most chemistry with Aerith, because that's Aerith for you. But
that's what they want to have, basically.
Yeah, so the chemistry is strongest between those two. But no, Jessie did fancy Cloud, and you get to be a little bit of a hero to her and stuff like that. But no, they added stuff to make you care about the characters, and I think all the characters came off looking better than the original, because more time was spent on them. And that goes for the main characters as well. Like Aerith's got more airtime. The scene with her and Marlene is, for me, it's a lovely scene. Makes me like Aerith even more, seeing how kind of gentle and how loving she is towards the little girl. And it's just like, wow.
Yeah. So sweet. It's such a sweet scene.
It's such a sweet scene. And then it's just like, wow, what kind of woman. So all the characters are enhanced. So, and the story is enhanced. I wish the playing area was a bit bigger, but they were under the confines of being trapped in the slums. And although I did find it a little bit running back and forth over the same area multiple times, was a little bit like, okay. But under the circumstances, because they were trapped in Midgar, and it's a design decision they've made. I'm being really long-winded on this, aren't I? It's a 9 out of 10, like you. It's not perfect, but the small nitpicks I have, I think they might not be as bad next game, because they are going to be in the open world. Whether or not they've got a world map or not, I don't know. But
yeah, they do. There's a world
map.
Do
they? Oh, well, that'll be interesting then. So you might be able to explore a bit where the first game was lacking in exploration. So
it's a fog of war based map.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I just one of my favorite lines from Tifa is just like, how much ass I can kick, right? When she's in the car at the on her way to see fucking what's his name?
Don Cornelio, what his name is? Don Corneo, what he was called, yeah. I mean, like Tifa, I am a big. Aerith is my favorite character by quite a long way, but as far as playing the characters, Tifa's the best character to play as, mate. Gameplay-wise, in this game, Tifa is the best character to play as. She kicks all kind of ass, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah, she's amazing.
So even though Aerith might win in the character development, but when it comes to kicking ass, I think Tifa's got to win that one. So there you go, Tifa, I threw you a bone.
I'm not some princess to be like mollycoddled Oh shit!
Yeah. No, all the characters were good. I like Red 13 as well. He's not in it much, but no, the part where he just starts talking, and I did have a laugh where they're all scared of him, then he just starts talking like kind of a normal accent, and I was just like, that's just great.
Yeah,
Funny stuff.
yeah, good. Well, okay, so guys, what did you think of the game? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think it was faithful? Did you not think it was faithful?
Yeah.
Let us know in the comment section below. We'd love to engage you on this. And if you do like our podcasts, consider subscribing, clicking the bell, hitting that thumbs up button. And yeah, it's one of those once in a lifetime games. Squaresoft really pulled out all the stops to make this game a good one, and it really was.
And Pete, only 2 months or maybe 3 months. What will be now? 2.5 months, and then get the second game. So there we are. We'll find out a lot more information in a very short amount of time.
Oh, can't wait, mate. Can't wait. Anyway, guys, we'll see you on the next podcast. Until then, take care.
Take care.